out of breath and holding a single-party blower. "What do you want?" Stanley asked defensively. "I'm busy partying." "Mr. Roper, look at me," Jack said, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I am dying. My back is broken. My food tastes like potpourri. You have to take her back." "I didn't kick her out. She left," Stanley argued stubbornly. "If she wants to come back, she can come back. But I'm not begging." Jack took a deep breath. He realized logic wouldn't work with Stanley. He needed to appeal to his core nature. "Mr. Roper, do you know how much hot water she uses?" Jack lied smoothly. "She takes 2 baths a day. Long ones. The water bill is going to be astronomical. And guess who pays the utilities for the whole building?" Stanley's face drained of color. 2 baths. "And she leaves the lights on in every room," Jack added, twisting the knife. "She said it makes the apartment feel lively. The electricity meter is spinning like a top." Stanley dropped the party blower. The financial terror was more powerful than his pride. "I'll be right up." A minute later, a stern knock sounded on the door of apartment 201. Helen, who was pretending to read a magazine upside down, looked up. Jack opened the door. Stanley stood there, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "What do you want, Stanley?" Helen asked, refusing to look at him directly. "I'm very busy enjoying my independence." Stanley cleared his throat. He looked at Jack, then at Helen. "Your toaster is fixed," he mumbled. Helen lowered the magazine. "You fixed it?" "Yeah. Replaced the heating coil. Had to buy a whole new part. Cost me $3.50, Stanley said, wincing at the price. "It doesn't spark anymore." Helen stared at him for a long moment. It was the closest thing to an apology she was ever going to get. It was Stanley's version of a dozen red roses. "Well," Helen said slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "I suppose I should come down and test it. Make sure you didn't wire it to the garbage disposal." "You better," Stanley grumbled, turning around. "And bring your bags. The kids up here look terrible, like they haven't slept." Helen stood up, smoothing her bright caftan. She grabbed her large pink suitcase. "Thank you for your hospitality, kids. It was a lovely vacation." "Anytime, Mrs. Roper," Jana smiled, looking incredibly relieved. As Helen reached the door, she turned back to Jack with a conspiratorial wink. "And Jack, I'll get Philip the hairdresser's number for you tomorrow." Jack forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Can't wait." The door closed. The heavy footsteps descended the stairs. Silence beautiful. Unbroken silence finally returned to apartment 201. Jack walked over to the sagging sofa, patted the lumpy cushions affectionately, and looked at Jana and Chrissy. "I have never been so happy to see this terrible piece of furniture in my life," Jack sighed, collapsing onto it face first. "Good night, ladies. Wake me up when the lease expires." To be continued. Three's Company, The Santa Monica Chronicles. Prologue, The Apartment on the Coast. The salt air of Santa Monica had a way of clinging to everything, the peeling white paint of the apartment complex, the shag carpets that had seen better decades, and the perpetually furrowed brow of Stanley Roper. In the year 1977, the coast was a place of transition. The bohemian spirit of the 60s was curdling into something more polished, yet the grit of the boardwalk remained. Apartment 201 was a sanctuary of sorts, though most would call it a chaotic experiment in cohabitation. It was a place where hers and his wasn't just a catchy jingle, but a delicate social contract balanced on a razor's edge of landlord-enforced morality. The interior was a riot of harvest gold and avocado green, reflecting the confused aesthetic of the era. Jack Tripper, a man whose culinary skills were matched only by his ability to trip over flat surfaces, lived there under a shroud of necessary deception. To the world, or at least to the downstairs neighbors, he was just one of the girls. He had perfected the art of the flamboyant gesture and the high-pitched girl to satisfy the suspicions of Stanley Roper. To himself, he was a man playing the longest, most elaborate game of keep the roof over your head in history. He was a student of the culinary arts, dreaming of sofals while living on tuna noodle casserole. Chapter 1: The Niece and the Bribe. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the floral wallpaper that Jeanne had insisted would brighten the place up. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day where the air felt heavy with the scent of jasmine and car exhaust. Jack was mid-flip with a pancake, humming a tune from the radio, when the doorbell rang, not with its usual jaunty tone, but with a rhythmic, demanding thud that could only belong to one man. Downstairs, the atmosphere was thick with familial tension. Stanley Roper was a man of simple needs: a quiet house, a cold beer, his favorite easy chair, and his dignity. The arrival of his niece, Karen, from the concrete jungles of New York had threatened all three. Karen was a whirlwind, a girl whose presence in the quiet coastal complex was like a neon sign flickering in a dark alleyway. She was vibrant, loud, and possessed a New York cynicism that Stanley found utterly baffling. "Be quiet, Helen. You're going to wake her," Stanley hissed, pacing the living room of apartment 101. He was wearing his usual short-sleeve button-down and a look of profound anxiety. Ellen Roper, filing her nails with a rhythmic scritch-scritch, didn't look up. Her hair was up in rollers, a crown of pink plastic. "Filing my nails is going to wake up your niece. Stanley, it's not the filing. It's the fact that every time you break a nail, you swear loud enough to wake the dead. That's what got you up. You're more like her jailer than her uncle." Stanley ignored her, his mind fixated on his brother's solemn instructions. Take care of her. To Stanley, taking care of a young woman in the mid-70s meant building a fortress of boredom. He had taken her to Disneyland, where he complained about the lines. He had taken her to the museum, where he fell asleep on a bench. He had even walked her to the end of the pier and recited his war stories, specifically the one about the frozen rations in Belgium, until her eyes glazed over. He thought it was quality bonding. Helen called it false imprisonment. She ought to be out having some fun with people her own age, Helen argued. She ought to be out dating, living a little before she ends up like us. Dating? Stanley's voice hit a pitch only dogs could hear. In this city, it's crawling with